Howdy, this is Sailor the Piper Man, Piper the Sailor Man here, smoking some Carter Hall. I decided I was gonna get it, so I did, because I wanted to try it. Very chocolatey, nutty coffee. But I'm not coming to give you a review. I am smoking as a catalyst of what I want to talk about. And it is theology and philosophy. This is to Parsimonius, who had a wonderful video where he was with a father and another gentleman. They were talking about why the pipe. That was one of the videos, and the other video, he was talking about, I think, was prayer and worship. And the way they were talking about it was if they were believers in God, in Christ. They were talking about what it is, and reminded me of these discussions I had when I was at seminary. I went to New York Theological Seminary. At that time, it was Southern Baptist, but it was changing. There was a reform going on that I didn't know about. I had just got in. I came from a non-denominational background, but most of my theology, fundamental theology, was basic of Lutheran theology, Reformed theology. At the time, it's continually changed. And so during that period, what got me interested in going to study theology was a man named Dr. Francis Schaeffer. Whose writings in the last century foretold about the fragmentation that would happen in the church, and non-reason. One of his book, How Should We Then Live, is probably the most influential book that I ever read. Also Hans Kong's Does God Exist? So I was reading a lot of things from the existentialists from the German school. God is Dead, Karl Barth, Sartre, Immanuel Kant, Hegel, Platonists. But to me, the greatest impact was what he had been writing in the 80s and 90s. And it was about how American society is reliving the age of the 1930s and 1940s, the age of fragmentation and non-reason. The things that we're doing and it's reflected in our art, it's reflected in the movies, it's reflected in the way we talk and we hold conversations, to be very unrational and illogical. Back in the 1930s, there wasn't tolerance. Jews could not, in Germany, could not attend the Olympic Games nor participate in it. It was illogical because they couldn't participate in it, even though there was a large percentage of people that lived in Germany. They weren't allowed. America wasn't allowed to bring Jews, to participate. Yeah, but they were allowing black folks to participate, like Jesse Owens. Irrational in that they were blaming everything on that had happened to Germany on the German society. Hating on Germany for no reason but to hate. The burning of books. You know, you only had one way to look at things. There was no objectivity. You couldn't reason. You couldn't sit there and have a wonderful debate in Germany. If you was Nazi, you had to run for your life. They were willing to exterminate anybody that thought differently. And we're living similar. You know, if I'm an independent, I consider myself independent. So when I view the issues, I use my reason and logic and analysis to decide what issue I'm going to vote for. And I notice other people are not like that. Not everyone, but a lot of people of this new generation, whatever you want to call it, if you don't agree with them, that you disregard your thinking, it doesn't mean anything. It's not like you're going to school now. You know, these oppressive socialism and communism is their way or the highway. They're not open to thinking. They're just and these people are espousing what other people have thought in the 1900s, 21st century, without really analyzing what they're saying. And when you try to have a conversation with some of these young people, so-called students, they're arguing a point that's been argued for the last 50 years, and there's no rhyme to reason of their logic. You know, if you love Trump, you're on one camp, and if you're Democratic, you're on another camp, and they don't realize that many of these people that consider themselves Democratic are really talking about a socialist agenda or a communist agenda, or both, without realizing wanting this value for society, regardless of what you think. You know, they're willing to eliminate you from the process of engaging in a decent conversation. And How Should We Then Live, written by Dr. Francis Schaeffer, really was kind of in the 1990s, pointed to that the end of the 20th century, how was the church going to be like? Exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. He says the church will fragment itself, that the church will change from having in its center the believing Christ being the center, to, instead of Christ being the center, humanism being in the center of it. Instead of Christ being the center of it, humanism being in the center, everything revolving around humanism, humanistic thought, I mean, in school we studied the liberal arts, and we studied Aristotle, and we studied Plato, and but nobody studies all that. And if you were to study that, you will see how fragmented and how wrong these philosophers were of the last century in trying to put humanism first. So if you get a chance, read it. How Should We Then Live by Francis Schaeffer. You could read this on YouTube. But he predicted, he also had what was called, he wrote and he spoke on the Christian Manifesto about what would happen to the church, to the creeds. For example, I'm still a member of a Lutheran church. I no longer go to it because it's in the United States, but I'm still can say I'm a member. I haven't turned in my, say I'm not because I believed in what the reformers believed, the early reformers, the creeds. I believed in the creeds at that one time that they held. Now they don't believe in all that. Now it's gays and all this woke agenda and everything. And I would think Luther, and I don't believe in everything Luther said. And what he did wasn't perfect. But when it came to centralizing God and putting God in the center of things, and that things revolved around Christ, I was in agreement with that. That it is through our faith and through sola scriptura, through the scriptures. And from that point of view, everything flourished. But now they've taken God. There was a school back in the 50s called a German school, God Does Not Exist. In the 60s, I read a couple of books, and the reformers, neo-theology, that they didn't know who God was. They were searching for the historic Christ. All this other stuff that they were espousing, it was nothing more than fragmentation of philosophical inquiry. But they forget to read chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Romans, where it says, within man himself, there is a sense of feeling or knowing that God does exist. And I believe it's because I believe in the concept that we are composed of spirit, soul, and body. Tripod. We have a spirit, we have a soul, which is the faculties of thinking and making decisions, and we have the outer man with its senses. And he begins to talk about that. I mean, there was nobody smarter than Paul, who was learned in the Greeks thinking. And I find society a lot like that today. That has come to the point where there's the non-rational thinking, fragmentation, just like free jazz. You had Main Street jazz, you had classical music. And then you had a period in art where it was a realism, impressionistic, cubism, until fragmentation, post-art. And what we have now, ridiculous things that they call art, ridiculous movies that they say art is not art. Everything's edited. You notice the movies, everything's edited. Everything's like cut short. It's all about violence, actions. There was a period where everything was sensual in the 1960s, and it's moved on, and the people get caught on. And people have lost their sense of what is reality, with all the fake news, with the AI, instilling fear in the people. It's hard to have an understanding of what is reality and what is not, what's fake and what's not, and what's reality with all the games and things like that. People have lost their way as to what is reality, what's concrete, what is not. And they form their own illusions, their own state of being, regardless of what you think or how I feel. People don't sit down to discuss things anymore. So all these things have developed, and we're having our education system ruined. It was a place of debate, of talking and discussing. It's a place of gaining knowledge, and that's been destroyed. And now you got to be careful of all the brainwashing going on in these colleges. My worldview is Christ is the center, and from that basis, everything revolves around. You might be humanistic, but one thing or another, logic, reason, analysis is of so much important. Coming with a postulate, and before I was better able to discuss on these matters because when you're in college, you develop a vocabulary to speak on these things, which I forgot. But we're living in an age much like those in the 1930s, where reason and logic and sitting down and talking are less. And that's the point where I want to get to. Why the pipe, right? Parsimonious smoke talk. Why we smoke pipe? And I think one of the reasons we smoke pipe, it slows us down. It allows us to do critical thinking. And if you look at all those philosophers and thinkers like Einstein, they smoked pipe. They took out time to think, like Oppenheimer. Took out time to think, like C.S. Lewis, like T.R. Tolkien. They all were pipe smokers. And the pipe slows us down, allows us that opportunity from a fast-moving society, allows us to think. This is that question, why the pipe? I believe the pipe allows us to think. I mean, I could talk superficially about the pipe and what it does for us and the taste of the tobacco, right? That's on the surface. But when you go deeper, the deeper significance and meaning of smoking pipes, I think the Indians got it right. It brings peace, allows us to think and reason and not be so fragmented. This is Sailor the Piper Man, Piper the Sailor Man, coming to you. This is a shout out to Parsimonious. Thank you for your discussions on theology. Thank you on your discussions on worship. I'm going to cover that in my next video on worship. What is worship? I really enjoy you guys. I hope you guys keep it up. Signing off, Sailor the Piper Man.